Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. So this is kind of an impromptu video. As some of you might know, I used to sell hula hoops, but I actually closed my shop earlier this year so that I could focus more on content creating and just other things that are going on in my life. But I still have so much inventory, and now and again, I will put out a little bit of like a sale for some of my followers on here or on Instagram, just so I can get rid of some extra tubing that I have left over. So I thought that this would be a great opportunity to show you all how I actually make hula hoops. Just a reminder, I am not taking orders for hula hoops. I am just showing you simply how to make them on your own if you either want to open up your own shop or if you are just wanting to make your own hula hoops instead of buying one from another person. So with that being said, everyone makes hula hoops in a different way. This is just the way that I have found to make it easier for me and make a high quality hoop. I'm going to show you the standard way that most people make hula hoops, and then I'm going to show you some tools that not necessarily everyone uses and what helped me make really high quality hula hoops for my customers. But actually, before we do that, if you could be so kind as to subscribe to my channel, like this video, share it with a friend, just so I can get some more traction on it, and it can help bring other hoopers to my channel if they are learning, if they're wanting to become performers, if they are wanting to open up their own shop, or if they're just interested in learning more about hula hooping. So if you could like, subscribe, do all those things, it would really help me and I would so greatly appreciate it. So without further ado, let's get into it. So these are going to be the main tools that you're going to be using when you make your hula hoop. You're going to need to use a drill, a measuring tape, one that can wrap around the tubing. This is a riveter. This is going to be your tube cutter. The two drill bits that you're going to use are a 3/16, that's the larger one, and a 1/8 drill bit. Then you're going to need these rivets. That's going to help connect your connectors into your tube. Then you're going to need these connectors. I use polycarb connectors, and you can get those at Hoopology. And you're going to need a snap button. So this is going to help you take your hoop apart and put it together. And this right here is something that I use to sand my hoop down if it's not as smooth on the edges, and I'll get into all of that in just a minute. So you can purchase these tools at any hardware store: the sandpaper, the drill, the riveter, the tube cutter, and this measuring tape you can get at like any arts and crafts store. But these right here, the push buttons, the polycarb connectors, and the rivets, I get all of those from Hoopology, and I will link everything in the description down below. But the tools themselves, you can get at any hardware store, and then I highly recommend going to Hoopology to get any of these hoop materials because they have everything that you pretty much need. And then the most important thing that you need to make your hula hoop is your tubing. I'm using a 5/8 polypro tubing, but any hula hoop or any material that you're going to be making, it's going to be the same exact process as this one that I'm going to be using. So if you're doing a beginner dance hoop, if you're using HDPE, 11/16, 3/4, whatever it is, it's going to be the same exact process that I'm going to be doing using this 5/8 one. So all of my tubing is always from Hoopology. If you have not checked out Hoopology, I'm going to be referencing them a lot in this video. Be sure to check out hoopology.com. They have all the tubing that you could ever imagine, and they have all the materials that you need in order to make a hula hoop. And they also have a really helpful hoop making university where you can follow step by step how to make a hula hoop. But I just wanted to show you guys how I make a hula hoop and process that I go through to make one. So when you decide what size hoop you want to make, you're going to go to Hoopology's website, and they have a really helpful tool where you literally just type in the diameter of the hoop that you're going to make, and then it tells you how long the tubing is going to be for that hoop. So I've been making hoops for a really long time, and I'm going to make a 28-inch hula hoop. I know that the tubing is going to be 7 feet and 4 inches long. So I measure my hoops by outer diameter. So I'm going to be taking my measuring tape. I'm going to be placing it on the end of the tubing just like this. And I'm just going to measure out tubing. And while you're doing this, you want to make sure that the measuring tape is always making contact with the hoop as you're sliding your finger across. That way, it'll just make sure that you are measuring out the right amount of tubing. So mine goes up to 5 feet. I'm just going to place my finger down there, start over. Now I have 6, 7, and then I'm going to add about 4 inches so that it's 7 and 4 inches long. Then I'm just gonna place my finger right there. And now you're gonna take your tube cutter, just open it up, and you're gonna place your tube cutter right where you placed your finger. And you're just going to cut the tubing and try to do it as clean as possible. So what I like to do is kind of like go back and forth so that I can create a clean cut. And then once it goes all the way through, then I can just snap it out. So that was actually pretty clean, but if it doesn't look as clean, this is when you're gonna take your sandpaper. Always make sure that you're using a low grit sandpaper. You don't want anything too harsh because then it's just gonna ruin the tubing. And you're just gonna lightly sand the edges and try to make it as flat as possible. Then you're gonna take your connector. Since I'm using a 5/8 tubing, the connector that I'm gonna be using is a 1/2 polycarb connector. But when you're purchasing connectors, always make sure that you're downsizing a size for the inside of the hoop. So I'm using a 5/8. This is a 1/2. If you're using 3/4, you're gonna use a 5/8 insert. So I'm just gonna push this in and I'm just gonna check how the connection is by just putting it together. So it's not bad. It's not bad for like me freehanding it. You can see that there's a little bit of a gap right here. And if you are trying to make a hula hoop for yourself and you don't really care, then you can move on to the next step. But if you want to make sure that you have clean connections, see where the gap is, and then you're going to sand on the opposite side of it. So that's gonna help you even out the connection. So you're just gonna lightly sand it. Don't go crazy at first because a little bit goes a long way. And just kind of check your work as you go. That kind of feels nice. So I'm gonna put my connector back in and check. And the gap is definitely a lot smaller than it was before. You can like barely see it now. Now you're going to take your hula hoop apart and you're gonna make sure that your connector is halfway inserted into your tubing. So you wanna make sure that it's halfway inside. So this is about halfway of the entire connector. And depending on what hoop you're using, you'll be able to see the inside of the hoop so you can see how far you have to push it in. So now I'm gonna take my drill and I'm gonna use the 1/8, the smaller one. I'm gonna put it inside of my drill. Okay. And I'm gonna carefully drill a hole right in the middle of the connector. So it's gonna be right in the middle. So make sure you only drill a hole through the top part of the tubing. Now you're gonna take one of your rivets, one of these guys here. You're gonna place it inside of the hole you just made. You're gonna push it in like this. Now you're gonna take your riveter, and if you have a rivet that has multiple of these like little screw thingies, I don't know what it's called, you're gonna wanna use the 1/8 one. So you're gonna insert the rivet into your riveter, and you're going to apply pressure as you squeeze the rivet, and you're gonna keep squeezing. Let me get a better grip on this. You're gonna keep squeezing until the rivet breaks. So you're gonna squeeze, you're gonna break it off. So then that's going to take off this little straight part that was on the rivet, and you can just get rid of that. So now your connection is nice and safe inside of your tubing. Now you're going to connect the hoop. And what I like to do is place my hoop on the ground like this and make sure that my hoop isn't lifted on either side. So that means that the connection and the hoop is nice and flat. So I can feel that the hoop is nice and flat. So now I'm going to take out this drill bit. I'm gonna put in the larger drill bit. It's a 3/16 one. Make sure that it's nice and tight in there. And now you're just gonna take your hula hoop. You're gonna go halfway on the other side. Let me show you. Gonna be halfway on the other side of the tubing, and you're just gonna drill into the top half of the tubing. So once you have that hole, you're gonna take your hula hoop apart, and now you're going to take one of your snap buttons. You're gonna place it inside of the hoop with the bent part sticking out like this. So now you have your button inside of the hoop here. And now what you're gonna do is just connect your hula hoop, push it in, and voila! Now you have your hula hoop. And that's pretty much it. It's really easy to make the hula hoop. And I think like the hardest part about making the hula hoop is that all these materials are not typically something that you can purchase just like at your normal hardware store, especially obviously the tubing itself. The snap buttons, the rivets, and the polycarb connectors, those are all going to be found on Hoopology's website. So here are also some other tools that I like to have on hand that I may need to use if I'm having a little bit of trouble making the hula hoop. So let me talk about this tool right here that I used before. This is just a piece of wood where I glued sandpaper onto. So it kind of essentially becomes like a really large nail filer. And I feel like it just gives me a little bit more control when I'm sanding down the hula hoop instead of just using sandpaper by itself. One, it can kind of like make your hand kind of tired while you're sanding it down. This one I feel like is a little bit easier on the hand, and you have more control to make sure that you have those leveled ends so that you can have that cleaner connection. I also like to use this pipe cutter. So what you can do is just place the hoop inside of the pipe cutter like this, and you tighten it around here. And what this does essentially is just scores the hoop so that you can have a guide of where to cut your tubing. The only thing that I don't necessarily love about this tool is that it creates an indentation in the tubing. So the connection isn't nice and smooth all the way across. It's kind of like smooth, and then it goes in and then goes across. If you are not super picky about your connections, this tool I find makes it a lot easier to make cleaner cuts so you can spend less time sanding. If you want to use something like this, I'll make sure that I link everything in the description below so that you can buy all these materials so that you have them on hand. Another thing that might happen to you is that sometimes the tubing that you may receive from Hoopology might be a little tight on the inside. And what I mean by that is that the inner diameter of the tubing itself might be really thick, so that your polycarb connectors are unable to get inside of the tubing. So something that they also sell on their website is this little attachment right here. You can put this on your drill, and you're just gonna place it inside of the hoop, and it's just going to score the inside of the tubing, and it's gonna loosen it up a little bit. They have it for both the 3/4 tubing and the 5/8 tubing. This has really saved me because sometimes the tubing is just way too tight. I cannot get any type of connector in there. So I highly recommend getting these if you're gonna be making hula hoops on a regular basis. Something else that I also use sometimes when you're connecting a rivet, it doesn't break all the way, where it doesn't take off this metal part completely, and you may have a little piece that's sticking out there. Some people like to sand that down. I particularly don't like doing that because I can accidentally sand down the tubing itself. Something that I have used is this little hammer. This hammer is for jewelry making. I'll just use this one as an example. This one has a clean cut. I have to re-record this portion because my microphone died. So what I like to do is just set this part of the hula hoop that has the broken rivet. You're gonna put it on top of a table or up against a wall, and you're literally just gonna hammer it down until it smooths out. So I figured that this would be a good way to smooth out those broken rivets. But that is pretty much it. Those extra tools are not necessarily needed to make a hula hoop, but they are certainly very helpful if you ever run into any of those types of issues. So the things that you can find in your common hardware store are a drill, the drill bits, a riveter, and the pipe cutters. But for everything else, you can find all of it on Hoopology. I'm pretty sure that they have like some of these tools also available there, but if you don't want to purchase it from them, you can always just go to your local hardware store and you can buy it from there. Although I'm not making hula hoops on a regular basis anymore, I got all of my things from Hoopology. I used all of their resources in order to make my hula hoops and just picked up different tips and tricks that have helped me along the way. So highly recommend Hoopology for all your hula hooping making needs. And if you still have any type of questions when it comes to hula hooping, I feel like I covered everything, but if I didn't, make sure to leave everything down in the comments and we'll get back to you as soon as possible. If you're not already subscribed to my channel, I would really appreciate it. Liking this video, sharing it with a friend. It all helps get my channel out there so that we can get more hula hoopers into the community. Alright guys, I hope that this video helped you, and I'll see you in the next one. Happy hooping.